close look at the journey of a gospel icon, Tremaine Hawkins' life struggle, health, and controversy. In the annals of gospel music, Tremaine Hawkins is among the most potent, emotionally charged, and spiritually stirring vocalists. Over the course of her more than 50-year career, she has experienced both profoundly emotional challenges, unanticipated scandals, and times of physical frailty in addition to breathtaking musical successes. She is hailed as a trailblazer, whose voice has the power to soothe the hearts of even the most obstinate listeners and shake a sanctuary. Beneath the accolades, #1 hits, and iconic performances, however, is a person who has endured hardships, faced criticism, battled for her identity, and found rejuvenation on the other side of suffering. Her life serves as an example of perseverance and spiritual fortitude. Fans primarily recognize her as the soaring voice behind beloved gospel songs, but there have also been heartbreaking, misunderstood, and dramatically reinvented moments along her path. In an unusual narrative style that conveys the emotional depth of Tremaine Hawkins' biography, this article examines the entirety of her life, including her hardships, health issues, and the controversies that influenced her career. Origins based on fire and faith. Strong voices, both musical and spiritual, surrounded Tremaine Hawkins from an early age. Long before she entered a professional studio, her viewpoint was formed by her upbringing in a pious church setting. Her family demanded excellence, self-control, and a strong religious commitment. Music was more than just a pastime. It was a calling, a ministry, and a responsibility. It can be both protective and stressful to grow up in a close-knit religious group. Gospel singers are subjected to higher moral and spiritual standards, as Tremaine discovered early on. Every public statement, every performance, every attire, and even every facial expression might be evaluated. Although the church served as her cornerstone, it might also be a burdensome burden for a young person. However, she accepted the voice that God had given her and developed a vocal style that combined intense conviction, vocal gymnastics, and unadulterated emotion. The early years were a period of exploration. She didn't just imitate others when she sang in choirs and local ensembles. Instead, she created a voice all her own. People were aware of her voice's exceptional strength, soulfulness, and intensity, even when she was a teenager. She soon found a way to communicate feelings she didn't yet know how to articulate on stage. However, that voice would also lead her down pathways that were fraught with emotional struggle, pressure, and expectations. The unspoken burden of becoming a gospel star fans may easily perceive gospel performers as self-assured, divinely inspired individuals. However, many people spend years behind the scenes attempting to strike a compromise between their true selves and the image that the church requires. This friction became a recurrent issue throughout Tremaine Hawkins' life. Her upbringing encouraged her to stay inside rigid spiritual restrictions while also praising her skills as her career took off. She was informed that going into popular music could jeopardize her reputation and faith, and that gospel was the only suitable outlet for her gift. However, she secretly yearned to experiment with various forms of expression, connect with people outside of the church, and question the boundaries imposed on her by custom. Another level of intricacy was introduced by being a woman in gospel music. Instead of being fearless, daring, or vocal, women were frequently supposed to be quiet, submissive, modest, and traditional. However, Tremaine exuded confidence by nature. Her confidence was strong, her passion was evident, and her voice was loud. There was no nice enclosure that could contain her. On stage, this made her a star, but off stage, it caused conflict. She experienced the strain of being watched closely when any mistake could result in rumors or criticism from the general public. Her breakthrough years were brilliant and motivating, but they were also filled with tensions between the person she wanted to be and the person others insisted she stay. Eventually, these internal conflicts would surface as public disputes, some of which almost destroyed her career. Love, grief, and the emotional cost of public service. Tremaine experienced both happiness and heartache from marriage, parenthood, and family life. It required managing not just a relationship, but also a shared public image to be married to another musician, particularly one who was equally well-known and respected in the gospel community. Unrealistic expectations surround public marriages, particularly in religious communities. Many people believe that the pair is always strong, unified, emotionally ideal, and spiritually perfect. Seldom is reality so straightforward. During these years, Tremaine experienced emotional scars that burdened her spirit, including tensions, miscommunications, and personal disappointments. One particularly sad phase in her life was the dissolution of her marriage. The breakup of her relationship was more than just a personal issue because her life was intertwined with the religious community. People formed assumptions, took sides, murmured, and passed judgment. In the gospel community, divorce was frequently viewed as a scandal, and Tremaine was under constant pressure. However, she resisted giving into it. Her identity was not destroyed by divorce, and her voice was not silenced by sadness. Rather, it compelled her to think more deeply about herself. She found emotional fortitude she was unaware she had. She discovered that even people who are called to serve others occasionally require their own ministry. Her latter music became richer, more vulnerable, and more relatable to fans who had weathered comparable storms as a result of their personal challenges. Health issues, the struggle. No one anticipated Tremaine Hawkins's health was one of her most significant personal struggles. Gospel singers who yell, jump, and belt out notes for hours on end without displaying signs of exhaustion are sometimes perceived by the public as superhuman. However, the reality is that artists put a great deal of physical strain on their bodies, particularly those with demanding vocal ranges. Tremaine had to face her own mortality due to a terrifying medical condition. A massive, potentially fatal tumor was found within her body by the doctors. Even the most ardent believers are shaken by such a diagnosis. She had devoted years to inspiring others to persevere, put their confidence in God, and remain devoted during difficult times. She had to follow her own instructions now. It had a catastrophic emotional impact. She struggled with uncertainty, dread, and the thought that her life's purpose would come to an end before she felt complete. The general public was unaware of her struggles. Even when they are in pain, gospel performers never fail to grin on stage. Even when they are medically fragile, they still perform. Tremaine followed suit. Although the growth was successfully removed, the incident permanently altered her. She started appreciating life in a new way, cherishing each performance, breath, and stage moment. She came out with a more mature sense of purpose and a greater sense of thankfulness. It served as a reminder that every powerful voice conceals a weak person engaged in personal struggles that the outside world is never aware of. The gospel music controversy is nothing new for Tremaine Hawkins. Indeed, a certain point in her career sparked arguments that persisted for years. The gospel community erupted when she decided to experiment with a more current sound, fusing pop, dance, and contemporary production into her gospel songs. Her new style seemed novel, thrilling, and inventive to her listeners outside of the church. However, it seemed nearly rebellious to traditional religious audiences. She was chastised for deviating from the traditional gospel. They said she had compromised her faith in order to gain notoriety. As if she had violated the hallowed rule of gospel music, they scrutinized her attire, her music videos, and her stage persona. One of the most agonizing periods of her career was this controversy. All of a sudden, the same people who had applauded her gift began to doubt her intentions. She was no longer invited to churches. Religious authorities publicly discussed her decisions. Behind her back, other painters whispered. This retaliation hurt in ways that few could comprehend for a lady as deeply spiritual as Tremaine. However, disagreement frequently highlights a person's actual strength. Tremaine Hawkins boldly and gracefully defended her artistic decisions. She felt that God's message was not restricted to any particular style, and that gospel music should be heard outside the church doors. She refused to let tradition or fear stifle her originality. Ironically, the same action that sparked criticism also made it possible for upcoming gospel performers to experiment with contemporary sounds, merge genres, and reach larger audiences. What was once condemned is now the norm. For the freedom of others, Tremaine paid the price: rebirth and unbreakable fortitude. Tremaine Hawkins could have easily given up music entirely after the uproar of criticism and the emotional toll it took. After being rejected by the public, many artists withdraw. Tremaine, on the other hand, rebuilt, refocused, and emerged stronger than before. She went back to her gospel origins with a fresh sense of purpose, not because she was giving up, but rather because she wanted to speak uncompromisingly from her heart. Years of life experience had affected her later art, which held a greater feeling of spiritual connection. The sadness in her voice, the wisdom in her delivery, and the maturity in her phrasing were all palpable to listeners. Each performance turned into a testimonial. Each line seemed to be a doorway into her heart. Her reinvention was an evolution rather than a return. Fans who had previously misinterpreted her now appreciated her perseverance and acknowledged her sincerity. She was later welcomed back into the gospel community, which recognized her as a trailblazer, and a voice that had transformed the genre. Faith Through Fire, the music's spiritual depth. Understanding Tremaine Hawkins' relationship with faith is essential to understanding her. Her career, challenges, disputes, and triumphs all stem from a fundamental conviction. God gave her a voice for a purpose. She relied on faith in the face of grief. She prayed her way through health scares. Despite the commotion, she resisted giving in to resentment. She discovered her destiny through loss. She maintained her groundedness despite her achievements. This spiritual fortitude is reflected in her music. She sings from experience when she talks about healing. She sings about deliverance because she understands what it's like to be imprisoned and then set free. She sings about God's glory as a person who has personally witnessed miracles. Her religion is raw, lived, and put to the test by fire. It is neither refined nor flawless. She became one of the most cherished gospel voices of all time because of her genuineness. The emotional price of legend status. It's not simple to be an icon. While the gospel community honors its legends, it also puts a great deal of pressure on them. Supporters anticipate consistency, excellence, and unending motivation. Gospel performers frequently feel that they are not permitted to be human, make errors, or go through emotional breakdowns. For many years, Tremaine Hawkins bore that burden. She managed expectations from her church congregation, her household, her admirers, her fellow artist leaders in the industry, and her internal critic. There was a significant emotional cost. She gave up her personal life, her health, her mental tranquility, and occasionally her happiness in order to sustain her work. She never stopped singing, though, despite everything. Legacy, a voice that influenced future generations. The legacy of Tremaine Hawkins is not characterized by conflict or hardship. Impact defines her legacy. She taught generations of gospel singers that strength, originality, and sincerity can coexist. She made it possible for the modern gospel to grow. Her influence may still be heard in contemporary musicians that break boundaries, combine genres, and utilize their voices to inspire people all across the world. She demonstrated the boldness of women in the gospel. She demonstrated that having faith does not entail being quiet or modest. She demonstrated that reinvention is progress rather than betrayal. She demonstrated that surviving is an inspiring story to sing about. Her life serves as an example of perseverance. In conclusion, a tale of perseverance, fortitude, and spirit. The life story of Tremaine Hawkins is a wonderful illustration of what it means to persevere through adversity without losing your melody. Her hardships strengthened her rather than weakened her. She was not silenced by her disputes. Rather, they strengthened her. Her struggles with health did not terminate her calling. Rather, they served as a reminder of its significance. She is not just a symbol of the gospel. She is more than just a renowned vocalist. She is a lady who gracefully and powerfully overcame suffering, criticism, fear, and public scrutiny. Her narrative serves as a reminder that even the most powerful voices occasionally falter but continue to sing. Sometimes, in the midst of hardship, the most exquisite music is created.